Cyberpunk 2077 is a controversial game that's been in the headlines, as you can see right here, nonstop. A lot of people think that CD Projekt Red is focusing on fixing the game. And in this episode, we're going to detail why we think, basically 8 reasons why, we think they're actually not going to focus on fixing the game, and instead they're going to abandon Cyberpunk 2077, the main single player game, and going to just focus on the multiplayer cash cow. I mean, if we look at what we're seeing right here, right behind me, it's very clear. This is the article from Bloomberg Wealth that Cyberpunk 2077 cost the founders about $1 billion in wealth. And in this article, analysts have cut Cyberpunk 2077's 12-month sales estimate by 14%. Now, we're all corporate hacks. We've been working in corporate media for a long time, and we've worked for the big boys, and we know exactly how they think. And one of the main things that these corporate executives think about when talking about supporting a game, it's not reputation, guys. It's not community. It's money. Right, Perrin?
Yeah, the fact that this did not meet expectations and they're going to have to cut their expectations, and the fact that this personally affected the founders, the top line of the company, $1 billion in wealth, that has huge ramifications on this. I mean, think about this. You make a game with a group of people and you think it's going to be great. You think you're going to sell a bunch of money, or a bunch of games, make a bunch of money, sell a bunch of money, it makes sense. And you don't. What are you going to do after that? Are you going to continue to put more money into the thing that just lost you a bunch of money? Or are you going to move on to try to find a way to recoup your losses? I would put my lot in with moving on, recouping losses, not polishing the turd. So most of you who are out there saying, oh, they're going to fix Cyberpunk. They're going to fix Cyberpunk. Yeah, no, they're not going to fix Cyberpunk.
They definitely aren't. And Ross, part of the tragedy of this game, and it's still ongoing right now. We're all awaiting, we'll talk about this in a minute, we're all awaiting patch 1.2, but the game is still not available on the #1 gaming platform in the world, right? PlayStation.
Yeah, and that is hurtful. When you lose the biggest console, when they just completely take you off from being able to digitally play their game on their console, that's a huge red flag, because we've also we hear that, and the initial thought is, well, yeah, you know, once they get the game fixed and stuff, we'll be back on there. But we certainly haven't heard anything that suggests that that's on the table.
That's right. So this is just one reason, financial reasons. This game's underperformed. Money drives everything. But we have 7 reasons why beyond this, including numbers from Steam charts, Google Trends, different articles and sources about why we think Cyberpunk 2077 single player might just straight up stop getting updates, essentially being canceled. They promised all this DLC in this pipeline. Guys, I think it's a pipe dream, not a pipeline. Let's play the ad. This podcast is sponsored by Restream. Why live stream to one platform when you can simultaneously live stream to every platform to discover new audiences faster using Restream.io?
Next on our list, it's impossible to make this game run well on last-gen consoles. I think that the cat's out of the bag on that one. We all saw how that performed, and especially with such a shortage of production due to most likely COVID-19 of next-gen consoles, most people actually went to tried to play this on last-gen, and it just didn't work. I can confirm that. I got it on last-gen and got about 10 minutes in, and it was a completely unplayable game. So, is this going to be a case, gentlemen, of the lack of production of current gen, the PlayStation 5s and the Xbox Series X, is actually detrimental because this game cannot be played on last gen?
Yeah, obviously, yeah. I mean, Perrin, what are your thoughts on, why would they focus on fixing the game if it's probably nearly impossible to have it working on current generation consoles? Like, you know what I mean? Like, they need to get this back on the Sony and PlayStation store. But given the technical complexity of the game and the fact that they had 8 years to develop this game, do you think somehow in the next couple months they're going to shake it up and somehow make it work? It seems impossible, right?
Okay, you got to look at what are the incentives for CD Projekt Red to go through and do that. Well, the only incentive is, well, let's get it back on the PlayStation store and let's get it workable on consoles so people will buy it again. Guess what? Even if they did that, no one's going to buy it. because already the PR stink from this is unwashable. You can't wash it away. It is now known across all of gamerdom, all of gaming enthusiasts, all in most, even a lot more than just gamers and news media, that this game was a stinker at launch. It was a complete and utter failure, and CD Projekt Red cashed in their goodwill with their fans for money, and you don't get that back. They cashed it in. They legitimately cashed it in. So
you don't think they can earn that back with future titles?
I think if they just go back to Witcher or something like that and do a great job and like stick in that realm, they can build some of it back, but they're never going to get all of it back, and they'll only get a little bit. Like they'll never be able to get this stain off of their record. Before this, they were known as like the hero in gaming development. They did everything right. They were the ones that could be trusted, etc. Well, they broke that trust. They broke that trust completely with this, and they're never going to get it completely back. The only incentive for fixing Cyberpunk is to repair some of that broken trust. And will that yield for them financially? Most likely not. I mean, if we look at, let's look at the player base dwindling here for a second. I mean, this is Steam charts for those of you listening, and we're looking at the player decline from December 13th, the launch of 830,000 all-time peak concurrent players, and we're down here, a couple months later to 14,000 concurrents. Like the amount of people playing this game, there is just not an audience for or interest in it anymore. It's a single player game. People have either played it, beat it, or bought it, refunded it, or ignored it completely. Fixing it isn't going to bring in new people to buy it again. They've already weighed the decision whether or not to buy this game. And if they have or they haven't, they're not going to reanalyze that if it comes out for an older console, especially as we get farther into the year and next gen consoles are getting more and more accessible and more people are getting them. So I think getting it repaired and getting it fixed onto old gen is, first of all, this game, just technologically speaking, looks like, from an outsider's perspective, impossible to make it work on those consoles. And if they were to go through all that technical challenge to accomplishment, what for? What are they going to get out of it? I don't see it, guys. I don't see the point in doing it. I don't see the reward for accomplishing that task. And it looks like an impossible task from the get-go. So why waste the resources, move on to something else in the company that's going to actually provide some yield for their investors, which is more likely what they're going to do.
That makes sense to me, and I think that leads us to our next point. Why focus on a single-player game? You see that the player base is not even decimated. It's less than 1/10 of where it was at launch. Why focus on fixing a game like this? From a monetizations perspective, when the real cash cow is the upcoming multiplayer title. And so single-player games, the only money you can make off of single-player games are DLC drops. And this game is so broken that it's going to take them over a year just to fix it. Then maybe years longer to do DLC drops, etc. And the amount of money that they're going to make off of DLCs from the single player game is going to be significantly diminished versus The Witcher because their reputation is destroyed. So why focus on a single player game that has a player base that is basically dead by comparison to where it was at launch when trying to make money off of DLCs, when instead you could be focusing on microtransactions, you could be focusing on Battle Pass, and basically selling the game to whales at that point. That makes way more sense financially. And if we look at how a Cyberpunk 2077 hiring has been going, if you want to pull up the careers page, we like looking at facts, not just opinions here, guys. We're seeing that they are hiring for multiplayer jobs. Ross, can you run us through these job listings? And I want to clarify a few things here because I think people think that these job listings are to fix the single player. Look at your screen.
Yeah, well, they're actually, it's completely listed as multiplayer jobs. They got game programmers, lead system designers, network programmers, and then the
Ross, do you need a network programmer for a single player game? Just, I know you're not an expert here, but
I'm not even going to pretend to know, but I'm going to go with no for the sake of this. That doesn't make much sense. Now, obviously, when you're hiring artists and stuff like that, you don't have to list that as multiplayer because you're going to probably be, doing a little bit of everything as an artist. My question that I have here for you guys as we're talking about multiplayer, all the jobs that they're hiring for multiplayer. On Gaming Humor and News, I've talked to a lot of people on there who have all played Cyberpunk through and through on next-gen consoles and love it, by the way. Absolutely love it on next-gen. But the very vast majority say they have no idea how this game could be multiplayer and how it would work. Is that an issue for you guys, that this game maybe isn't even necessarily built well enough for multiplayer?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, on I'm about 100 hours into my playthrough. I actually didn't finish the main storyline yet because I'm finishing every side quest, every gig, every car, every collect, every legendary. I'm doing that with this game to enjoy every last drop. I'm playing on PC. And people say that the game isn't built for multiplayer. This assumes that they are going to be using everything that's in single player for a multiplayer mode. This assumes that the multiplayer mode for this game is going to be an open world game. I think a lot of people are assuming that Cyberpunk 2077 multiplayer is going to be a GTA online copy paste, where you get to run around this open world, collect cars, commit crimes and stuff like that, like you saw in GTA Online. My guess, if I were to guess, given the technological mess that Cyberpunk 2077 is, my guess is they're looking to do instanced multiplayer, meaning you're going to run into dungeons, essentially, instances, and go do multiplayer scenarios in there. You're going to run into kind of loading screen based areas, not big open worlds, to do the multiplayer functionality, not have it all be in some big open world. And if you're able to do that, then they could create some interesting co-op experiences, maybe even some interesting PvP experiences where they could avoid some of the massive technological issues that they've run into with the single player by limiting the scope and limiting the scale in multiplayer to smaller instances, smaller number of players, limited size, in order to compensate for the fact that the main game is not optimized at all. They are probably making those decisions right now. They probably already made those decisions when they looked at how poorly the game runs in this open world single player environment. And my guess is they're figuring out how they can break off this game into little boxes and little chunks and make those optimized for multiplayer. That is my guess. And they have got the guy on board that's running multiplayer for this, the creative director for this, who did Guild Wars 2 PvP, which is instance-based PvP combat for the most part. They did have some open stuff. And also he did Star Wars The Old Republic PvP. And he put that together in 8 months before that game launched. And he took a turd of a game, essentially, at launch and turned the PvP into something interesting that was engaging. And these are things that he did. He took a larger game with larger cities and then he did instance-based PvP and multiplayer combat. I think that's the direction, if I were to predict, that Cyberpunk multiplayer is going in. So a lot of people are like, the single player won't translate into multiplayer. Yes, you're right. And it's not. It's literally not going to be that. That would be my guess.
That, though. They literally teased that Cyberpunk Online will be, you could play it as if you were playing similar to GTA Online. That, I think that's where it got confusing. Of course, that could have changed 100 times by now, and it probably should. The way you're describing it is how it should happen 100%.
But maybe they'll make a mistake and they'll think that they're good enough or they could optimize it enough or whatever to be able to pull this off.
Yeah.
Yeah, one more mistake in a long line of mistakes. But I guess the point here, though, is that the cash cow is going to be multiplayer. That's the cash cow. The microtransactions with the cars, the microtransactions with the clothing, the microtransactions with the battle pass, the monthly subscription fee of some description, the whales that will drop thousands to be able to collect every single gun and every single skin. Making that sort of microtransaction system happen will make them exponentially more money than the single player game. Even further reason for the team at CD Projekt Red, and this is a hot take, I guess, it's a terrible business decision for CD Projekt Red to invest in fixing the single player game. I will say it again. It is a terrible business decision for them to focus on fixing the single player game. And I know gamers want it. I know I want it. I'm currently playing the single player experience. But if I were advising that company on what to do, I would tell them to pull all resources from the single player game, pretend like it doesn't exist, and just only focus on multiplayer, because they are a publicly traded company. And the only thing publicly traded companies care about is dividends for investors. And if they want to make dividends for investors happen, multiplayer is the future to make that happen. Back to you, Ross. It's a spicy take, but it's a really awful business decision for them to dump millions, tens of millions into fixing the single player. people with nostalgia glasses will look back on it and be like, oh, it was pretty cool. Back to you, Ross.
Okay, so moving down here, no matter what they do with single player game, parent, the reputation, it's not going to be restored. You kind of hit on this earlier. So taking this, even just taking the single player aspect out of it, what does CD Projekt Red have to do to completely restore their reputation at this point?
There's nothing they can do. They traded it for money. Like, they can get some of it back, but it would take a lot longer to build back up that trust. It would take consecutive successful game launches, and it would take them launching into a new IP successfully as well. This is them launching into a new IP out of The Witcher. This is I think that this is their first new IP, and they failed. So they've shown that they can't bridge out of their comfort zone successfully. So they would need to be able to prove that. And they need to build back. They would need to build back up goodwill with Cyberpunk fans in some way. They do now have access, and I do believe they own the Cyberpunk IP, so they can do more things with this. But their launch with it being so poor, I mean, there is a portion where they'll never be able to come back from this. Their once formerly taintless, spotless record is permanently tainted and stained now. And you can rub some of it away. You can bleach it as much as you want, but it's still going to be there. And there's nothing they can do about that. And we look how quickly people were willing to drop the idea of Cyberpunk. This is Google Trends. We always like to look at this when we do our episodes, but this is particularly interesting. We've talked about this spike trends before. Look at how quickly people were willing to drop this game. It spiked up from December 5th, 2020 on launch here, or a peak just about right before launch, December 6th through 12th. December 13th was the peak active concurrent users on Steam day. And then by January 16th, we're already down completely back to normal. It took a month for everyone to forget about this thing. We were cool, like we saw. Then the only reason why there's probably a lot of search interest here on the downside is because of all the drama in the news media and that came out on social media of people talking about all the bugs and how much of a fail this was. But at the end of the day, it caused this trend to crash and interest to die prematurely. This would have, at least, if it was a decent game, been a 3-month trend. On average, spike trends last 3 months before they're completely down on the decline. And this one only lasted 1 month. That shows you that people were willing to cut ties with this and move on and not waste their time on something they considered to be garbage, trash, like total waste of time, a scam, even in some cases. So I would say to restore the record, there are gamers here that CD Projekt Red will never reach again because they have forgotten it, and they won't be willing to revisit this game developer again for any reason because they've been jaded now by them. And you can kind of see that being modeled here in the data.
I don't agree with that. So I'm going to have a hot take on that. I think as soon as CD Projekt Red shows the trailer for the next Witcher game, which will be 5 years from now, and as soon as they show the trailer for Cyberpunk Online, every one of these people are going to go, oh, I don't trust CD Projekt Red at all. And then they're going to swipe their credit card and pre-order it. So I do not agree. I think that the Cyberpunk IP is so compelling, it's so interesting, and it's so unique, and is now his household name. The graphics, as you're seeing on the screen, are so phenomenally good. The style, the art, the music is all so emotionally charged and cool that I think that they are going to be able to run a successful marketing campaign for the online version of the game. So as we saw from the original Cyberpunk game, they were able to take a unpolished game, hide the problems with it, and run what I think is the most successful marketing campaign of any video game of all time. And that same marketing team, guess where they work right now? A CD Projekt Red. So I think that they will be able to market this game very effectively. I think that they will be able to sell the crap out of multiplayer, and I think they'll be able to sell the crap out of The Witcher as well. Maybe the development team didn't get time to make this game what they thought their vision was, but they certainly gave the marketing team the resources they needed to get people to buy it. With 8 million pre-orders, those pre-orders weren't just the quote-unquote goodwill of CD Projekt Red. Those 8 million pre-orders that came in from this game were just phenomenal marketing. With Keanu Reeves, incredible trailers, the Night City Wire, the press releases, the way they handled all their booths, all of the conferences. It was masterclass. 10 out of 10, S tier, God level marketing for this game. And that team is still on board. And I guarantee you that team hit their bonuses this year, my friends, because they did maybe some of the best marketing I've ever seen. And if CD Projekt Red can retain that marketing team and keep them on board to market multiplayer, keep them going with those bonuses and those raises and what have you, that same team will be able to crush the sales of multiplayer and The Witcher. And gamers will say, there will be some complaining gamers out there, but when they see that trailer where they're like, hey, do you want this car? Imagine the trailer, guys. Do you want this car? Yeah. Okay, do you want these 100 cars? Pre-order right now, you get 5 of them for free. Do you want this bot you can control in some of the multiplayer missions? Yeah. Oh, well, here's a skin for that bot that is just for pre-orders. If you pre-order the battle pass today, not only do you get your character, but you get these proprietary gorilla arms if you pre-order, etc., etc. They're going to crank it up to 10 trillion because they know they have to push through that bad will, and they will do it, and they will be successful, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. And, this next point here, and Ross, we talked about this when we were planning the episode. When we're talking about investing in video games, dropping millions of dollars, who the hell invests millions of dollars in fixing a single player game? Have you ever heard of that before?
No, I was actually looking at that and was about to ask you the same question. Has that ever happened? Has a single player game ever flopped? And then they came back and dumped a lot of money in it. Now, technically, we could say that No Man's Sky did, that Hello Games did that with No Man's Sky, but they also put right out of the gate, after their botched launch, put a huge focus on multiplayer to help draw people into the game. But they did make single player better, more playable, I guess. But that's the only one that I can think that even comes close to what we're talking about here. So no, I don't think it's ever happened before or ever happened in a way where the game was a complete botch and then they went back and reworked the single player and turned it into a success. At the very least, that's never happened.
I agree. And let's look at some numbers right here. These are the viewership on Twitch. And if interest is this low, Perrin, walk us through these numbers. If interest is this low with streamers right now, do you think them fixing bugs is going to bring it back? I mean, walk us through these Twitch numbers. This is even worse than we predicted in terms of streamers and creators being interested in covering this game for free.
Yeah, so Thursday, December 10th, 2020, at its peak, Cyberpunk 2077 had 662,000 concurrent viewers over about 22,000 channels. In 3 months' time, they're down to just 1,334 viewers spread across 128 channels. It means there's a myriad of very, very tiny channels with very, very tiny viewership for this, and clearly it's not growing. So real quick to take a look, I mean, we're talking about they shouldn't fix the game, they should just move on. Well, let's look at, are they working on fixing the game? The last update was on February 4th was the last content update anybody has seen. Since then, there has been some word at February 24th about their development update and what they're going to be doing and what their goals are. And it's just basically buying them time. So they've only issued one update in the past 2 months, and it was on the far 2 months ago side. And things don't look like they're going to be progressing there very quickly. So I think they already might be on this track of, they'll string users along and do some very critical updates that are possibly game breaking. Well, there's already enough game breaking bugs with that game. I don't really know how they would address it. They'll do things to keep it alive as best as they can, but they're not going to be focusing on it very much. And you're going to see very infrequent updates there. I'd be willing to bet. The thing is that could keep this alive a little bit more, and who is providing updates to it, is the modding community. So the modding community could drive some interest back into Cyberpunk 2077 if it becomes open and modded enough, and there's enough cool mods. And just browsing around on the Nexus today, there's already some really cool stuff. Like there's some insanely cool cars. They're already doing what maybe CD Projekt Red
seriously, how can these modders do this? Like, for those of you that are listening to the audio version, the modders have new custom paint jobs for cars. They've got FPS enhancements to get better performance. They fixed the driving system to make the handling better. They made it so that the police chase you in cars. You can add cyber arms to yourself. They built out the customization for your characters even more. I mean, they're literally changing missions. There's a custom paint job pack for motorcycles. They changed it so you can do your hairstyle differently. Like, the modding community already in a month has done what would be considered a massive DLC by CD Projekt Red. But the modders just did it for free already. And so it's so interesting to me that the modding community can do what would somehow cost somebody like CD Projekt Red like $30 million or something. They can do it with $0 on Nexus mods. I mean, it blows me away.
Well, because the CD Projekt Red developers are handcuffed a lot in what they can and cannot do. And you have people like these modders who are extremely, extremely smart people and can replicate the work that they're doing there kind of without the handcuffs, like I said. And I can't believe I'm about to defend CD Projekt Red here. In CD Projekt Red's defense, and I believe they actually released maybe like a statement earlier this last month, when they had that massive data leak and all their engine and everything went on sale and sold, they did come out and say that we unfortunately cannot focus on Cyberpunk fully at this time. We're going to, but this has to be our top priority. It was something along those lines. So there is a reason why, and probably a pretty good reason why they haven't been able to put as much focus on it. But even so, even with
well,
that,
they did say, to double down on your point, you're not defending them or whatever. It's true. They said that they were literally locked out of for 2 weeks was the leak. That their employees were locked out of their own workstations when they got hacked for 2 weeks. So that did develop patch 1.2 by at least 2 weeks, right? But I would go a step further and say that patch 1.2 is just going to be bug fixes, and the DLC is never coming. I would say that there's an 80% chance that the DLC, the big DLC, the paid DLC they have in their pipeline, will never arrive. This is just like Anthem. Anthem dropped their initial bug fixes, then they promised a big patch. The big patch eventually dropped, but it was like nothing. And then they talked about their pipeline, and then it disappeared. It's the exact same thing as Anthem. And so this is just repeat all over again. I've been following this every step of the way. And these executives that are making the decisions at these companies are going to make similar decisions, right? Just like with Anthem, the game launched to terrible reception. They do some patches and fixes. Internally, there's probably huge amounts of turmoil, and they're saying, you know what? Why are we going to invest our resources in fixing this turd when we should just invest our resources in the next project? Let's look forward, team, instead of looking backwards. It's way easier to say, let's look forward instead of looking backwards. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen here with Cyberpunk single player. There's no reason for that not to happen. Back to you, Ross.
Yeah, there's zero incentive to do this, right? Like, what is the incentive at this point to fix single player?
I mean, people think that like their reputation as a developer matters. They're like, you have to restore your reputation. I got bad news for you guys. If they fix the single player for this game, their reputation is not restored. I don't think you get it. Like, and they don't care. When they released this game early, knowing it was completely broken, they knew it was completely broken. Guys, they released ultra PC footage and put a PlayStation 4 label on it when they marketed this game.
Yeah, that's
Are you
100
fucking kidding me? They knew exactly what they were doing. So they don't care about their reputation. They knew that they were doing that to burn you guys. It was just straight up false marketing. They didn't give any shits about their reputation when they lied to everybody and just straight up lied about their product. Look at this footage on PlayStation Pro. That was not PlayStation Pro footage. It was PC Ultra footage. Give me the biggest break I've ever heard. So I don't think that they clearly don't regard their own reputation. So it's really not even a topic of debate. Back to you, Ross.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot to get this reputation back. Like Perrin said earlier, it's going to take The Witcher 4, and it's going to take it being a semi-perfect game in order to get that reputation back. And if they didn't have a title on the back burner like Witcher, something to kind of go back to that does have potential to, regain steam, maybe start building up their reputation again. If they didn't have that, they'd be done. they would be so done right now. But what is and I honestly didn't know this. What are they doing with mobile, AWOL?
Yeah, so there have been a couple investor related or executive level conversations or PR releases that have kind of gone under the radar where CD Projekt Red has said that they are working on, but they're not ready to talk about mobile games, plural, right now. Mobile games, plural. Similar to how Blizzard is developing multiple mobile games for all of their IP, I think it's reasonable to assume, I would say 90% plus chance, that they are currently at CD Projekt Red developing a Witcher mobile game, obviously, and obviously a Cyberpunk mobile game. No brainer for them to do that. Once again, they're looking to drop the single player game like it's hot. It was a great marketing tool that put the Cyberpunk IP out there big time into the consciousness of everyone. Now that they have that IP out there, they're obviously developing a mobile game for this IP in addition to The Witcher, and they will be dropping that mobile game at some point in the next handful of years, and guess what's going to happen? All of y'all are going to download it, and all of y'all are going to give them hundreds of dollars with it. That's just how it is, and they know it. Back to you, Ross.
I don't know. See, I think their reputation is damaged enough to where they're still going to make a killing on it. It's mobile gaming. We talk about this all the time, how much money is actually brought in through mobile gaming. But that's going to be interesting because I'm literally 50-50 on if that's actually going to happen, on if people dive into the mobile game. Sure, mobile games I think they're actually a lot easier to get into. I think it requires a lot less work to get to the point where of quote unquote perfection, especially with the development of it. But I'm going to be very interested to see where their reputation stands when this game releases, and if it can actually help their reputation go up. But moving on to our last point here, merchandise sales, product integrations, all of this for Cyberpunk 2077. It is a really cool brand. I think everybody can agree with that, kind of taking an outside perspective, looking in. This is a really, really cool brand that could easily translate well into merchandise and product integrations and things like that. But is it too little too late for that?
What do you mean?
No.
Is it too little too late? Are you kidding me? It's already done happened. Are you kidding me?
Yes, I know, but is it too little too late to get get exactly what out of that what you want if you're CD Projekt Red? As in, how much of a hit are they going to take because of their reputation on merchandise sales and product integrations?
Dude, it's selling like hotcakes, bro. Man, those official guides, those comic books, those books, the t-shirts, your COVID mask, your hats, your bomber jackets, sold like hotcakes, bro. I would guess they made tens of millions of dollars off of that, maybe $100 million plus off of product integrations, for sure. Internationally, you name it. It's a cash cow of a brand. So they just licensed the crap out of this IP to literally everybody out there. They have their own gear store, sure, but they licensed it to so many other companies along the way. Displates is one company, posters, mugs. This is just the stuff on their store. But the comic books, they talked about how they have an anime show that's coming up as well. They are taking this IP and they are looking to make this the foundation of their entire company. And how do you make something the financial foundation of your entire company? Just ask Disney. It's merchandise sales. You use the game, you use the thing you release in theaters or the big show or whatever to market the merchandise. Like, look at Star Wars as an example. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but the most recent Star Wars movies were horrible. But it doesn't matter. They made a ton of money in the box office, just like Cyberpunk did. And most importantly, they sold toys. They sold books. They sold t-shirts. They sold merchandise at Target, at Walmart, all the vendors around the world, BB-8s out the yin-yang. Every kid's got an effing BB-8 in their room. That's the whole point of this. It's the new strategy for them. Cyberpunk 2077 is their Star Wars, if you will, in this analogy, where they can just release big marketing pushes for the game, get everybody thinking about the IP, and then sell them products and toys. And that's how they're going to make maybe even the majority of their money in the long term. That's what I think is going on here. And it's a really smart business decision for them to juice out this IP in that way. What are your thoughts, Perrin?
Yeah, and it's a no-brainer. Look how many products. I'm still scrolling. They have a ton of products, and this is, like you said, just on their store. and they're not cheap by any means either. And you can tell that it's doing well because there are so many variations of products. There's puzzles, there's posters, there's all kinds of clothes and um, accessories that you can wear. I mean, they've pretty much thought of everything. I'm still actually scrolling, but it's not just the merchandising that they're going to make off of this. It's everything that they can do with the IP. They can market it how they want to. They can make little mobile games that have tons of microtransactions. They have the access to do pretty much whatever they want, to my understanding. So they can milk this and make a ton of money because they've done the most important thing. The thing about Cyberpunk 2077 is it was a fail from the gamer's perspective as a game, but from a marketing perspective, it's a huge win because they literally sold the um, they literally broke the record for the most amount of game sales at a launch time, and the fact that the marketing team was able to achieve that shows how marketable this IP is, and I guarantee you they will double down on that. I guarantee you they know they can make money off of this IP, especially after they've activated the emotional response of all the people who are interested in this, and they just got let down. Like you have so many people now who wanted this IP, who wanted to be engaged in this universe, who wanted stuff, merchandise, a game or whatever, and now they're kind of lacking. They don't have anything. The game was crap, or they've played through it and they're done with it already. They're left. The key thing is they're left with wanting more. That means there's room for the marketing team to come in and sell. So
That makes
if
sense.
anything, the demand for the Cyberpunk IP has been increased by the failure of the game. And so now the marketing component of Cyberpunk has a lot more to work with because the game component failed. So basically, the reputation of CD Projekt Red does not matter at all. I mean, look at EA. EA is a great example. You don't need a good reputation. EA has been voted like worst corporation or worst company like ever in the history of companies, like 3 years running or something like that.
Quite literally, yes.
Like quite literally on the internet, they've been voted that, but they still sell, and they sell like crazy. And they do so because they know they have people who want to buy, and they have good marketers who know how to engage those potential customers and get them to buy. We already can tell that's happening. And Cyberpunk 2077 was a huge success from a marketing standpoint. That marketing team knows what they're doing. And I guarantee you, none of that team got canned. I guarantee you, they're all still there. And they're all still working on selling the Cyberpunk IP.
Speaking of selling it, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Restream.io, for sponsoring our podcast. We are streaming on Trovo, DLive, Periscope, YouTube, and Twitch. And if you're a content creator, especially a gaming content creator, it's really difficult to grow out there, especially if you go exclusive on any one platform. We very highly recommend streaming to all platforms to maximize your audience. We do it 4 times a week here on the Digital Drop podcast. I do it twice a week on the AWOL podcast. Perrin used to do it almost every day as a psychotic, obsessed streamer. I don't know why I describe you as like this sociopath
that sounds
streamer.
Totally like me.
It sounds totally like you. Streaming Mobile Legends as well, and I've recommended it to dozens of my clients on my consulting service. And the point is this: don't go exclusive on any one streaming platform unless they're paying you cash. And if they're not paying you cash to do it, you're wasting your power. Your power is the power of distribution. The power to distribute your content anywhere you want to distribute it. Restream gives you that power by sending one signal to their servers and getting your stream out everywhere at the same time, so you can figure out which games on which platforms are going to grow your channel. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. And let us know what you think. This is the first time I'll ever say this on the show. We actually want to know in the comments below what you think. Do you think that Cyberpunk 2077 single player is going to be canceled? And why or why not? This is the first time I've ever asked you guys to comment, because I think this is an amazing discussion topic. So many of you guys are going to disagree and think we're being too harsh. I think history will shine brightly on what we're talking about. And I unfortunately think in about 2 years, we're going to look back and say, told you so. Sorry, guys. That's just how it is. Adios.